Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Connectionless. I'm Reverend Matt, and I just kind of wanted to share my story today about my call to ministry. I know a lot of people are interested in that. I know a lot of content creators on YouTube, a lot of content creators in the space are lay people, meaning that they're not pastors, right? And so I think in some ways I give kind of this different perspective, being a clergy person, being an ordained minister in the United Methodist Church. But the steps that get you there take a really long time, and it was quite a journey for me. So I grew up in the United Methodist Church. So I'm a cradle Methodist. I grew up at a church in Northeast Oklahoma, a pretty big church. And yeah, I just grew up going to church my entire life. My parents were not Methodist growing up. They became Methodist as adults. And so I grew up in the church. I was pretty involved, and I started to really get involved when it came to youth group. So when I turned like 12, 13, I started going to camp. I started getting really involved in youth group. And to me, it never occurred to me as a teenager, like an early teenager, that ministry was going to be a part of my future at all. I didn't do very well in school because I just never wanted to do my homework. I was that kid who just like never wanted to do homework. And so I just wasn't interested in anything career wise. And so it really, when I think about my journey, it was kind of unlikely from that standpoint, because it wasn't like I was obsessed with church from the moment I started going to church. But the more I engaged in youth group and the more I got involved in that space, I really started to find a home there. And what I mean by that is I found a way to engage where my skills and gifts and talents were appreciated and useful as well to the church. And so I remember going to camp. This is like 2008. I remember going to a leadership camp here for the Methodists in Oklahoma. And I started to meet other people who had similar thoughts and feelings about the church. I was 14, 15 years old. I can't really remember. And at the end of the week, I had this very powerful experience with the Holy Spirit where I felt God call me for the very first time. And I had no idea what that call was. It literally took years to figure out what that was, but I felt this calling towards something that I didn't yet understand. And so that was in 2008. I think I was going into my sophomore year of high school. And, I kept getting more and more involved in youth group. I got more and more involved in my conference, which is how the United Methodist Church is structured. We have these conferences. That's kind of like the basic structure of Methodism. And I got more involved in my conference's youth ministry. I eventually started to lead our conference council on youth ministry as I was a senior. So I started getting really, really involved with the church. It got to the point where when I was a senior in high school, I was a pretty decent tennis player, and I was playing on the tennis team, and I literally quit the tennis team to be more involved at church. And so my life started to move on this trajectory, but I still thought like I wanted to be a cop or in politics or a lawyer. Those were kind of the career paths I was wrestling with and thinking about. And then my pastor came to me when I was a senior in high school. This is like the fall of my senior year of high school, and he said, "Okay, I'm going out of town for a couple of weeks on a mission trip, and I really want you to preach all three Sunday morning services on one of the weeks I'm gone." I'm like 17, almost 18 years old. This church at the time was worshiping like well over 1,000 on a Sunday. So this was like a really big thing that he asked me. And I remember immediately saying yes before I really like thought of the consequences of that yes. And so that's the thing I remember, is saying yes before I thought about it. And I remember he walked away. He was like, "Great, sounds good. Here's the date and all that stuff." And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh my gosh, what have I done? This is a lot. I don't even know how to write a sermon. I've never written one before." I had written a devotional before, but it was really bad. I actually remember giving it. I remember my pastor coming and watching me give the devotional. I remember how bad it was. Which is just really funny to think back on. And to this day, as I prepped for that sermon, I remember how much time I spent on it. I've probably to this day never spent that much time on a sermon ever again. I mean, I like poured over every single word of it. I practiced it a couple, 2 to 3 dozen times. I practiced the full length of this 20-minute sermon, but I remember being confident in my ability to do it. and to give it. And I remember my associate pastor tried to meet with me and talk through it. And I was like, no, I got it. Don't worry about it. I got it. This is the arrogance of a 17-year-old boy. And I remember getting up and I gave this sermon. And actually, this is something I haven't thought about in a while. It just came back to me. On the morning of the sermon, I remember I was at the early service and the power literally went out. And like the entire part of town, the power went out. And I didn't know what to do, right? The power goes out. I'm on this manuscript that I'm reading and the power goes out. And I look at the sound guy in the back and he's like, giving me like the shrug, right? He's like, I don't know. And I remember I just started to belt it out, right? So that people could hear me without the microphone. I just raised my voice and belted it out. And then the next two services went really well. And I thought the sermon was really well received and people were coming up to me saying things like, have you ever thought about being a pastor? Is this something you've thought about? You should do it, all those sorts of things. And I remember getting in the car with my parents after the service, and I remember they said to me, well, what did you think? How did it feel to do that? And I remember saying, it was okay. Like, I remember saying, like, it's not for me. And never have I told a bigger lie than that. I knew in my heart that it was a gift that I had and that God was probably calling me to do it. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. And so I struggled for the next month or so. I really struggled with it. I thought about it a lot. And on a Sunday morning after that, a woman came up to me and she said to me, how long are you going to run from what God is calling you to do? How long are you going to run from what God is calling you to do? And boy, that really like hit me pretty hard. I mean, she was bold and brave enough in the spirit to just say that to me. And so over the next few days, I really struggled with it. And I was working at Best Buy at the time. So I was a senior in high school. I was working at Best Buy. I think by this time I was in the home theater department. I was selling televisions, which I liked. It was a good job in high school. And I came home from a holiday shift. It was December 14th, 2010. I remember the date very well. I was coming home from a holiday shift at Best Buy and I pulled into my driveway and it was past midnight. And I just remember just being overcome with as time goes on, the details of this are slipping away. And that's kind of sad to me. I probably should have written more down earlier, but the details of it are slipping away. All I remember is being overwhelmed being overwhelmed with a sense of emotion and a sense that God was with me. And I remember pretty distinctly praying to God, I will accept this call and that I will serve God for the rest of my life. And I remember just like crying in my 1999 Chevy Blazer in the driver's seat because I knew my life was going to change and be different. And I had to choose schools to go to college and all that kind of stuff. And so I remember going inside. I went inside to the house and I woke my parents up who were asleep. And I told them, I think I'm supposed to go into ministry. And they said, we know. We know that that's something that God's been calling you to do and whether or not you would answer that and when and all of that. And so they supported me. And then I remember looking up and a college application. So Oklahoma City University is my I'm an alumna, I guess is how you're supposed to say it, of alumnus. Wait, alumnus women, right? And alumnus is men. I think that's good enough. I'm an alumnus of Oklahoma City University, which is a United Methodist college, and they have a religion program there that's very good. And there was a scholarship there called the Bishop Scholarship, and the application for it was due the next day. And so I remember like staying up, doing the application. My parents checked me out of school the next day so that I could drive to Oklahoma City myself and turn in the application by hand, which I did. And I remember going to the interviews and all that, and they didn't give me the scholarship. My grades were pretty poor in high school for the first couple of years because I just didn't care and I didn't have any direction as a teenager, which is pretty typical for a lot of people. And so I turned in the application and I didn't get the scholarship, but they did offer me a 70% tuition scholarship, which was pretty good. And we accepted that. And I talked with my parents, and they felt that they could make that work. And so I went to school, and I started working as a youth pastor at a church. And then eventually I accepted an appointment after college and became accepted my first appointment in 2015. So I've been in appointed ministry for almost 11 years, 10, 11 years, over a decade at this point. And then I was ordained elder in 2020. I was actually ordained in a TV closet because they could not have the ordination service. And I'll never forget the bishop kind of waddling up to me with his gloves and his mask on to lay hands on me and ordain me as an elder. It was an interesting experience, one I cherish actually, because everybody remembers their ordination, but very few people get a unique experience in their ordination like that. And so I kind of cherish the memory actually. But I tell this story today because there may be some of you out there who are watching that, and God is tugging on you, and you think, well, it can't be me, or I don't want to, or whatever it is. I understand that. I understand that. I understand what it means to be in that position, and I'm praying for you. And answering God's call in your life can be very difficult. But it's been very rewarding at the same time. It's got its ups and downs and its ebbs and flows. I'm not going to pretend like it's awesome all the time. It can be very difficult. But when you are doing what God's calling you to do, there's no greater joy than that. And joy doesn't always mean happiness, right? Joy means fulfillment. And so, joy doesn't just mean fulfillment, but that's an aspect of joy is to have fulfillment in the purpose in which God has placed upon you. And so if you're out there and you're struggling with that, I completely understand. And I encourage you to really explore that. Talk to your pastor, talk to somebody, a Christian that you trust, because if God is calling you, that's something that you'll want to answer and be faithful to. But yeah, I wanted to share that story just so that you all know a piece about me and to understand that call changes throughout your life, right? Your call may be one way at a certain time and another way at another time. And also the further you explore your call, like for me to be an ordained minister, right? But that call gets really specific over time too, right? God called me to be an elder and ordained, but I also feel like this more specific call to do strategic work in the church, and then this even more specific call to do, reform within my tradition. And so your call kind of gets more specific the more you explore it and the more you draw close to God and know what God wants to do with your life. And so I hope that's been helpful to you. And so if it has, and this channel is helpful to you, one of the best things you can do is like and subscribe. That's one of the best ways you can support the channel. But until next time, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.